and then
Uh,
we'll dive right in. Do you have any questions before we start? I mean, we went over all the questions I plan on asking, but is there anything that you wanted to lead with?
um, no, I think we're good. I just want to make sure my audio sounds okay
Yeah,
and
you're good.
that you're gonna have everything you need. Okay,
Yep.
perfect.
So let's start with your educational background. So how did you get in to Dartmouth, and what was the process of being recruited there like?
Yeah, absolutely. So Dartmouth was a school that I only lived about an hour away from growing up, but I never really saw myself going there. I thought it was maybe a little too close to home. And it was just kind of funny how everything fell into place through the process. So I realized by my freshman sophomore year of high school that Division 1 ice hockey was a goal of mine, and that it was something I wanted to commit to and pursue. And I went to a hockey academy called NAHA, North American Hockey Academy. So October through March, I was dedicated to being a hockey player, and it was practice and lift in the morning and tutoring or catching up on classes in the afternoon. So I was very much committed to that role. And so it was about my junior year when I was starting to look at schools. And when I started to explore different colleges, there's only about 30 schools that offer Division 1 women's ice hockey. So right off the bat, I can narrow down my search from hundreds and hundreds of schools to just 30. From there, it's about what position do you play, what style player are you, and what is the school looking for. So I was really fortunate to dial in on some matches that were promising, but ultimately Dartmouth was one of the first schools I talked to and felt the most comfortable at on campus. And that was really a testament to the coach and to the girls on the team for the culture that they created. And I knew by my second visit that that's where I wanted to go. And when they offered me a spot, it was a pretty easy yes. I felt like hockey was something that really opened a door for me there. I was really aware of keeping my studies up, but at the same time, I came from a small school in Vermont, and it's competitive getting into schools like that. So I was grateful to have hockey be part of that full package that allowed me to even have the opportunity to go to a school like Dartmouth.
And then at what point in your college career did you approach the rugby coach and say, "Hey, I may be able to do both of these"?
Yeah. So that was I realized towards the end of my junior year that it was something that I was really interested in. Rugby wasn't really on my radar until a little bit later. I just, wasn't really sure what it was as a sport. I had friends on the team, but their field house and their games were a little bit off campus. So you had to coordinate and have a car. And as already being a student athlete, my schedule was pretty packed. And I wish I had gotten out there earlier because I probably would have been drawn to it initially, but what it was for me at the end of the day was seeing the profiles and seeing the promotions for the Rio Olympics, the first Olympics that women's rugby or rugby in general was in. And I saw those women who were just strong and athletic and physical and fit. And I saw this sport that was this incredible combination of soccer, which was really my first love as an athlete, and then hockey, the sport that I had gone on to play competitively for 12, 15 years of my life. And it just clicked. Something about it was like, that's something that I would love and, have a hunch I might be good at it given, enough time put in and hours of practice. So I walked into their office and I said, "Hey, look, I'm pretty committed to seeing out my full 4 years on the hockey team. And, I'm going to be a captain and I really want to be there for my team. But at the same time, I'd love to have the opportunity to try out this sport. And I will give you 100% when I am there. So what do you think?" And they welcomed me with open arms, and we're pretty excited to just have somebody that brought what the enthusiasm that I brought. Really, I was just like happy to be there every single day. So it was an incredible experience getting to then have both those sports in my life for it was a year and a half that they overlapped, and then I went on to play rugby for another year and a half post school. So.
So
Mhm.
what was that like, trying to balance both of your sports and going to an Ivy League school?
Yeah, it was interesting. I mean, it was really nice that like when the second that hockey like season was over, it was the next week that I was in the gym with the rugby team, and they're like building up to peak like max strength for their before their spring season, whereas we're coming off of like the end of our season for hockey and we're pretty beat up. So my body was a little bit in shock, and um that I had to kind of figure out how to manage that piece. But for the most part, I was fortunate that I was never, like, committed to, like, "Okay, I have to go to a rugby meeting and then a hockey meeting in the same day." You know, their seasons were separate, and coaches, kinda understood that, and that was great, but at the same time, it did adjust what was typically an expectation of hockey players, that you'd have your senior spring available to you to be, quote, unquote, "a regular student," and just go to class and do your homework and keep life simple in that sense. Whereas I just rolled into, continuing to pound my body and my mind and my schedule with another sport. And it was a lot, but at the same time, it was all I really had known. So it was probably easier at that point to just continue with the momentum rather than, have that senior spring and then try and take a fifth year or something and get back into student athlete life, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then you mentioned post-collegiate rugby. What happened?
Yeah, so it was something, like I said, I just like had a tremendous passion sparked for this sport, the people, the style of the game, and I was excited to be learning again. When you get to the top of your sport, like I was getting to at hockey, it's really just small tweaks, like minor details about little things in technique, little things in the game that you try and study, and um, so that curve, it doesn't really it's not as exaggerated in terms of improvement as it was when I got to step onto a rugby field and say like, "Okay, 2 days ago, I couldn't get this technique for passing the ball down and now I can." And that was just really encouraging. So I loved it. I wanted to continue. And I also, I think inherent to competitive athletes wanted to see what my, potential was in the sport. So I was eager to just continue, like I said, with that momentum of I'm an athlete, I compete, I train, I fill my days this way. I don't know anything else. In a way, it was kind of a crutch now that I look back on it in terms of me not wanting to fully address that at some point I would not be an athlete. But for the time being, I was just enthralled with it. And I moved down to Hawaii and got a chance to play with a team down there, met some more incredible people, and was just, again, trying to find my way and where the right training environment was going to be. So I ended up playing in a tournament in Vegas, which was really exciting. But at that tournament, I broke my collarbone. So I was all of a sudden just kind of floating, a place where I didn't really know a ton of people, had to, get on a plane back to Hawaii with a broken collarbone, and then ask myself the hard question of, okay, what happens now? Like, do you rehab this? Do you get right back into it? What does it look like? It was the first time that something was really forcing me to take a step back from training every single day.
So, looking back on it, do you think that the pressures that you put upon yourself and that you kind of willingly engaged with adding the entire rugby team and their training schedule to your schedule, do you think that that contributed, as you're looking back on your experience, to the the disordered eating that was happening kind of simultaneously?
Hmm. It's an interesting question. So you're asking like if the pressures contributed to
Y-
it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I think it's tough because though my timeline was like some of my toughest years with having disordered eating and struggling with food and body image, particularly as an athlete, particularly as a female, were towards the end of high school and then through kind of junior year of college. I felt like I started to turn a corner. Um, and actually, what I would say rugby did for me was put me in an environment where that's a sport that so many different body types are celebrated and that you have to have different body types. You have to have props that can move people out of the way no matter, what they look like or how strong they are. You have to have backs that are fast and agile. And so it wasn't I for the first time kind of felt like, okay, I don't need to adjust or change my body to be a good, hockey player, to be a good rugby player in general. It's more like I will be placed somewhere on the rugby field based on the value that the way my body already is can add to the team. So that was really cool. And there was just, yeah, so much diversity and so many different perspectives on body image and, identity, because the rugby team also had other walk-ons. So whereas my hockey team was full of people who had played that sport their entire life, just like me, and rugby was people coming from all these different places, and who, were kind of given the gift of finding it later and therefore knowing who they were before they added rugby to it. So all that to say that I think the tie of I am an athlete and my body has to look a certain way to function a certain way to get value to being an athlete was less intertwined on the rugby side of things, and was able to support where I was just starting to get to in my recovery journey of, going to therapy more consistently and finding other things that, made me me and gave me value beyond my time as an athlete.
Wow, that was fantastic. So let's back up even further to the beginning of this cycle of kind of a mindset shift followed by the disordered eating to begin with.
Yeah, yeah. So like I said, I think I can point back to, as early as junior year of high school where I was really struggling with it, where I had, a goal in mind for the scale, where I had, rules and regulations in my head around what I was going to eat and when I was going to eat it. And then I think it turned another corner closer to end of freshman year of college when I, lost a friend, was struggling to adjust to, college in general, and the pressures of playing at a D1 team and not always getting to be the star of the show or, getting to start. I was a fourth line player for my first couple years, and I was okay with that. I always had a gritty mentality, but at the same time, there can be those doubts that creep in your mind of, am I good enough? Will I ever turn that corner of being a starter? Where do I add value to this team? And so struggling with that self-worth and with some of that lack of control that was, thrown in my face, that I can't save people I love from bad things happening in life. And, I can't keep everything wrapped up in a nice bow, in other areas, that I turned to food and I turned to my body, where those were things I could control. I could control how many reps I did. I could control, what kind of food I ate. And the more rules and control I looked for in that area of my life, the deeper into that cycle I fell. And it's something that was really, you know, frustratingly, now that I look back, easy to hide within the athlete mentality, because I could tell my parents, well, I'm just trying to train really hard for hockey. Or, my teammates would look at my plate and they, it would be something that was commended, like, oh, Mac, only eats vegetables, or, you know, Mac doesn't want the bread, pass it down here. And those were comments that in their eyes, they're like, "Oh, I wish I, had the quote unquote discipline that she had." But for me, it was crippling. Like, it was, if I ate that bread, I couldn't go and like hang out with my friends and be in a good mood, because anxiety would start to creep in. And yeah, it was just overall really tough, because I think I was trapped somewhere between not really realizing the extent to which I had a problem for a little bit, and then not knowing how to ask for help, and people not really being able to see that I needed help.
So at the time, I mean, you had a nutritionist within your athletic department. So what was the process of consulting with that person? And was that a contributing factor, or was it something that the nutritionist didn't pick up on?
Yeah, so I definitely went to go talk to her, and I struggled primarily with like or orthorexic, tendencies and orthorexia, which is this pursuit of healthy to the point that it's not healthy. And like I said, having food rules, like certain foods fall into the healthy category, certain foods don't. Um, and so I, would go to her and say, the exact same thing. I wanna be, I thought leaner was faster, was better, was, more efficient as an athlete, and so that was my goal, and that's always how I felt like I could articulate it, and it was better than saying I wanted to lose weight because, I wasn't one of those people that just wanted to be small and tiny and skinny. I wanted to be strong, and I thought that, that was okay. Why wouldn't it be okay as an athlete? Um, and I would go in and really just ask, like, what should I eat? Like, what can I do? Will you just tell me? Will you take the decision portion out of this? I will eat anything that you put down on a meal plan. Just do it for me, because I was so scared to make choices around food, because I had given it so much power, and I knew, if I made what I thought was the wrong decision, what it could do to my brain for the rest of the day, the anxiety it could cause. So I would go and I'd ask her those questions. And it's tough too because, I remember talking to her when, I stopped getting my period for a while in those years, as happens when you underfuel your body. Your body literally says, I don't have enough resources to, you know, maintain a healthy cycle and to go through the potential of giving life to another human, because that human won't do well because it's not going to get enough resources, which is scary now that I look back on it. But when you're young and you're ignorant and you don't understand how that impacts your hormones and everything else that goes into being, a mentally stable, healthy, physical athlete, like, I was throwing it all out of whack, and I thought it was just like, oh, it's kind of convenient, like I don't have to worry about that. It's terrible, but I did. um and so, for all of those things, the way I was kind of just like, please just tell me what to eat, please, just, tell me how to be leaner and how to get to this goal, where I had no business needing to be any leaner. Like, I look back at photos from that time, there was nothing about my body that needed to change. Not having my period and then going through a summer where I completely overtrained and underfed myself, where we had body composition testing, and I came back and my trainer was like, okay, well, you're leaner, absolutely, but like, I can tell that your body fat went down and so did your muscle mass because you ran out of, your fuel supply and you started eating into your muscles. And um, that was a wake up call for me, because again, I was telling myself this story so strongly that what I'm doing is good for my body. It's making me a better athlete. I'm working harder. I'm, punishing myself and suffering, and that something good has to come out of that. That's what every good athlete does. They push themselves beyond other people. But it was, the first time where I had to draw the dots and say, okay, what I was doing to push myself that way actually is holding me back. And yet, given those conversations with that strength coach, with that nutritionist, all of those things put together, coaches and teammates making comments in team meals, like, nobody ever had a conversation with me about it. Nobody ever followed up. Nobody ever asked a question. And I still, have some trouble with that.
So, what do you think that athletic departments can do to intervene in the event that one, the athlete doesn't recognize that this is happening to them? I mean, do you have to approach the conversation differently if the athlete is not particularly as self-aware that this is a cycle that they're in? Or do you think that it's kind of a blanket conversation that needs to be had with an entire team at the same time?
Um, yes, absolutely. An entire team, like, it should be part of standard protocol for teams in general. And I say that because, like, it took me, I was a psychology major, and it took me, like, going into some of my classes around, mental health, yeah, disorders and different things that people struggle with across the board, to even, like, learn the term orthorexia, to even understand that, like, body dysmorphia was a thing, to even realize that there are people out there that look in the mirror and see something so strongly that is not an accurate depiction of how the rest of the world sees them, and that the power that our brain has to to spin those stories and the way that culture reinforces them. So I think just that initial awareness, like I would have been able to put myself into one of those one of those groups of people earlier and realize like, oh, what I'm going through actually isn't normal. It's like not, I mean, unfortunately, it kind of is normal, which breaks my heart. The amount of people that I've heard, have had these same experiences. But it's not healthy. And I remember when I stopped counting calories, like would track everything I ate every day for years and years and years. And I was like, okay, it's like I need to stop. Um, and it was partly because there's this realization like, whoa, like normal people, healthy people, people who have a neutral relationship with food don't do this. And I've done this for the past 6 years of my life. Like it's all I've known. And now like to not track something seems strange, but at the same time seems like a first step towards freedom. So um yeah, just the awareness is huge in that initial team conversation. And then in terms of approaching an individual, like it is absolutely sensitive. And depending on where that person is, like there's the opportunity for them to potentially be defensive, to be in denial, to not want to approach it, to not be in a place to ask for help. Um, but I think if I just knew that somebody else saw it, if I just knew that somebody else wanted better for me, if I knew that somebody else saw value in me being healthy beyond just what it would mean for how I could compete on the ice or on the field, that would have meant the world to me. And I think one of the reasons why it existed in the first place and why I didn't, pursue asking for help like once I realized what I was in for with my coaches was like partially because it felt like it was a weakness or it felt like it was admitting something that was taking away from my ability to perform on the ice, which in a way it was, but I needed help tackling that so that I could show up for my team and I could show up for myself and for my coaches the best me possible.
So do you think, I mean, what did you think your coaches were going to say to you if you brought this conversation to their attention?
Yeah, to be honest, I don't know. I don't know what they would have said. I had so much respect for them. Like I said, they were one of the reasons why I chose Dartmouth in the first place. Um, but at the same time, because I was struggling to see myself as more than just an athlete, um, I don't think that I believed that they would see me that way either. And I don't think they would have, admonished me. I don't think they would have thought less of me. But I didn't really see where they were gonna be able to, like, make any significant difference. It just kinda felt like it was my personal battle as well. Um, and I think the other thing too was that, like I said, my freshman year, I had a friend pass away and I did like, that one was impossible to hide, right? Like, I came back to campus and I had a terrible first practice back. I was, out in left field and my mind was not on hockey. And I was able to tell my coach why. But, after that, there was no follow up to, hey, how are you doing? Like, is this still bothering you? Like, how can we support? Do you know your resources? So I think given that previous experience, I was feeling like, okay, if I'm struggling with something, I could tell them, but I don't know what difference it's gonna make or, if they're gonna follow up.
Wow. So you really did feel like you were doing this by yourself.
Yeah, yeah, and I think, it was tough too because in the locker room was a similar feeling, like, I felt like I had to, hide when I was struggling with it or, not let my teammates see that I was having, a moment before practice or after practice or on the bus or something like that, and then there were times where, like, again, it was blatantly obvious, like, I was upset about something, whatever whether it was food or my body or whatever it was, and then if a teammate saw that, like, it was not often that they came to say, "What's up? What's going on? Like, can I help? Do you just wanna talk about it?" And I think That was I graduated in 2017, so it's been 4 years, and there's been tremendous amount of dialogue around mental health in sports and for athletes. So I just have to hope that it's changed since then. Um, but I think just those little moments where I felt seen and then not supported left a bit of a track record for me to say like, okay, I do feel like I'm on my own. And it was little moments on like the side conversations, or this one time walking with a friend to the dining hall where we both, she expressed feeling the same way. She was like, I'm going through this, and I'm lost, and I'm floating, and I don't know what to do. And we made a deal then to go see a therapist. And it was like, all right, call by Friday and I'll text you and check in and make sure you did that, and vice versa. And that's what was my first leg up out of kind of the hole that I was in, where a therapist could be that person, that would check in, that would follow up, because you'd have that standing appointment and it was their job. So I think there's a lot of value to that system in general. And I was really grateful for that, just that one moment, right? And I again wonder, like, if somebody had taken the time to ask that question or have that conversation earlier, could I have gotten out of it earlier? I don't know.
So looking back, I mean, now that you're more vocal with what you went through, do you have any of those teammates coming to you and saying, "Oh my gosh, I had no idea this was going on. I'm so sorry that we let you struggle by yourself."
So it's interesting. I did give like a monologue. There's an event that goes on campus every year for women, not just athletes, women across campus, to stand up on stage and speak about what they've gone through as, female identifying people on campus. And I shared kind of a slam poem style piece about, pursuit of perfectionism and how that had driven me to make, success quantifiable and be within my control. And yes, it occurred, as Ivy League student athletes in the classroom, but also, in all these other ways, and the way that I viewed my body and food. And sharing that was so powerful, just the writing process, and then standing on the stage and performing it in front of, everyone on campus. But the most scary piece of that was that there was, 15 of my teammates in the audience, and like that's what was freaking me out the most. And their feedback at the end of the day was, um it was really kind, but at the same time, like, it was like that moment, like, wow, I really appreciated what you shared, Mac. And I think people forget that these things aren't just um singular events, they're processes, and that you kind of battle it every day, and you have good days and you have bad days. Um and so I was grateful to like put that out there. And yeah, it was just something that a couple of other people then also came forward and said, like, I've had similar feelings." Like, one girl who is no longer on the team anymore was like, "That's my story. You just told my story." And that was both, like, comforting and heartbreaking, obviously, right? Like, you go through it and you don't want anyone to ever be going through what are fighting. But
So what did when that first teammate came forward and you made kind of the pact to each other, what was the catalyst to her coming to you specifically? I mean, was it
yeah.
just a big coincidence that you guys were both going through the same thing, or was that a pointed decision from her perspective?
Yeah, so she was actually processing like a family member that had passed away. So she was just like, it wasn't exactly the same thing, but regardless, it was feeling like we were alone with, dealing with mental health on our team. And um I think we had kind of established a pretty good friendship. You have a team full of over 20 people, and you're not going to click on a deep level with every single one of them, but you are going to with a few. And so we already had kind of a great base of that friendship. Um, but I think I also, started noticing myself playing that role of that kind of neutral person that people felt like they could come to. So as I looked around the locker room, I could say, all right, well, that person is figuring out that person's struggling with that person's struggling with that thing. Like, I didn't always know the gossip of who's hooking up with who, and like, what the cool thing to wear out was, but I knew like people's real stuff, like the heavy things. Um and it hurt me that those things weren't being talked about in the team either for them. Um so I think it was just, a little bit of like our relationship and the fact that, I was kind of like that quiet, like trustworthy person that people felt like they could, be vulnerable with, which I'm really appreciative for.
And then in our pre-interview, you said something that was just really interesting to me. I asked you something about your psychology coursework
Mhm.
and if you saw yourself within what you were learning in your curriculum. And I wrote that down immediately as you answered it in our pre-interview because I wanted to bring it back up. I mean, did you see, as you were learning all of these psych principles and the importance of talking about mental health, I mean, did that, did you see yourself within those lesson plans?
Yeah, absolutely. It kind of goes back to, my answer to your question of um, having a team conversation and just bringing awareness to what people can go through. And like I said, like getting to the like eating disorder section of our psych textbook, I was like intrigued, but also like a little nervous to learn all the details of it. And I mean, I remember like my freshman year texting my mom and just like saying, like, I think I'm broken. Like, I don't know what it is, but there's something I feel broken because I swing from like one side of the pendulum to the other of like a great day to all of a sudden, like, something triggers me and it's crippling. And that doesn't feel like it could be right. Doesn't feel like it could be the way to like live the fulfilling life that I really desperately want to pursue. Um, but I didn't have the words for it. And I was grasping at them in that text. And so being able, like I said, to find these words like orthorexia, like body dysmorphia, like that there's all these spectrums of eating disorders and how we view things, and that you don't have to hit a full DSM-5 criteria, or you don't have to have somebody like stepping in and putting you into an inpatient treatment center, and you don't have to like have lost or gained X amount of pounds for your mental struggle to be valid. Like if it is impacting your quality of life as it 100% was mine, like then it's worth getting help for, and you deserve that help. And so just learning that and being able to again put those terms to what I was struggling with was huge, because I love the quote, like, you're never going to win a fight that you don't know you're in. And so that just gave me that initial awareness to be like, okay, I got to roll up my sleeves if I want this to be different, and I need to step forward and step up and start to figure out what narratives in my head I need to challenge.
So you said that you were nervous about talking about the eating disorders chapter. What do you mean nervous? I mean, were you having anxiety even having the conversation around it? I mean, did you identify with each chapter of that textbook?
Um, I mean, it's tough. Like, I didn't identify with like the schizophrenia chapter, so it was like I knew that that probably wasn't going to apply to me. But like when you hear the professor like talking about something that is your lived experience, it stirs up emotions, and I didn't really know like how that was going to impact me. I didn't really know like what it was going to do. And again, like going into that, I didn't know where I was at with all of that stuff. So I knew that it was something I wanted to learn about, but like up until that point, wanting to learn about that stuff came in the perspective of, Googling the top 5 foods for like athletic recovery that are low carb, or, like these distinct food rules, and like, what workout can I do on top of my strength workout? And like I would nerd out on like nutrition and exercise, but not in a healthy way, in a way that I wanted to learn everything about it so that I could manipulate it, so that I could use it for myself, that I could, put it into my distinct goals. And so this was the first time where it was like, all right, I'm starting to learn and nerd out about like the other side of my experience, not just like the voice that was driving those narratives, but the voice that maybe wants to to stop them or to battle them or to find a healthy balance.
Were you tracking using an app, or were you, I mean, what was that process like?
Yeah, I mean, I would use like my Fitness Pal or Fitbit was like the one that I used for a really long time. So, um, the one I remember that was the one I was using when I was like, okay, I kind of need to stop. And like I could still tell you like, how many calories an apple would track or an egg or like this bar or that bar. And like it's just like information that has forever been stored in my brain for better or for worse. And yeah, that was something that I also then had to kind of reorient my relationship around like fitness watches, and they've become a huge trend. So, I had to like go wear just like the Walmart like battery operated standard like LED, you can tell the time, at midnight kind of thing. Um and just do that for a while because it gave me some distance between that impulse to track or to just see like, all right, how many calories did I burn today? Let me just like plug and play, quickly add up how many calories I probably ate, like because I could still play that game in my head because it was all stored there. I didn't need, an app to tell me that anymore. So in order to really step away from that and to start to heal, I kind of took the watch aspect out of it as well.
Wow, I mean, that's something that I would never even think of. I would never think that that had such a large impact on your ability to stay in this mindset.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many things that were linked to it too, right? Like if I had it on my wrist and it was going to track, calories or XYZ or whatever burn, like then was I really working out like for the purpose of training, of getting better at my sport because it made me feel good to be mindful? Like it just put all of that into question, and it made me feel like, well, maybe I'm just working out to see the calories burned number go up and to, have that equation come out as zero or in the negative so that calories burned were more than calories ate. And then, that just somewhat sick voice that goes on in your head to tell you that that's a good day. And, if the equation didn't come out in the negatives and it was positive, then that's a quote unquote bad day, and I was just sick of those labels and those numbers giving that power to what was a good day or a bad day. I want it to be, how I felt, the relationships I built, the conversations I had.
So let's turn this a little bit more positive right now
Hmm.
and talk about the 2016-17 Agnes Kurtz Award.
Yeah.
What did that symbolize for you?
Um, yeah. So that was something that was a really cool experience in that um that was the like all school one my senior year. Do you have the description of the award there?
I wrote down a combination of women's sport advocacy and athlete proficiency.
Sweet. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah,
I figured it was probably good context for
yeah.
listeners and I was not going to do that justice, but um yeah, so that was an award that was given out at like the end of the year banquet. So all athletes were present and like able to vote on who that should go to. At the time, I was a part of kind of like a female athlete in sports group on campus, and was fully entwined with the rugby team and everything. So honestly, one of the coolest feelings of my life was getting nominated for that award and then winning it and being able to look back at a crowd full of Dartmouth athletes and have both the hockey team and the rugby team cheering for me and being really excited, and knowing that I had their support, and that in 4 years of being on what is a pretty small campus and then really small when you reduce it just to the athletic department, that my career from sitting on the bench to, being a contributing member of those teams, from the way that I held myself, in my character and the way I treated people in the weight room and said hi to people and mentored freshmen, that all of that like was seen and was acknowledged and was appreciated, and that people felt that I deserved that. Because at the end of the day, like that really was my goal, was to be able to like be a leader. My freshman year sitting down with the coaches, they're like, okay, what are your goals? I was like, I want to be a captain of this team one day. Like I want to be that kind of person that leads by example and whose actions speak louder than their words. And who people respect for that, no matter what, day in, day out. And I think what was really cool about that award in particular was, even though I felt like I got that from my hockey team who'd seen me those 4 years, like that was the entire school um, saying that. So it was cool.
That's amazing. So, what was the catalyst in creating the Sideline Perspective? And what is the demographic that you're hoping to reach with your content?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I started the Sideline Perspective because all of these factors that we've been talking about, um, there's there was a lot of parts to my journey that made me, feel like being an athlete was top tier of who I was and a huge part of how I gained that respect and how I gained that appreciation. And, where did that come from if I wasn't the athlete that I was, or if I didn't get to showcase the person that I was through athletics. And I realized pretty quickly as I stepped away from hockey and then ultimately when I was injured playing rugby that when I slow down and athletics isn't like in my daily routine, when working out, when training, when some sort of, team goal isn't on my horizon, I felt lost. I felt like I didn't know where my purpose lay. I didn't know how I could give back to people or influence other people's lives the way I was able to as I was part of a team. So I figured I probably am not the only person feeling that. And I feel blessed that, going through my, um, eating disorder experience gave me the tools to have vulnerable conversations and to start to, ask questions and think critically about how to support others and support myself through something that was impacting my mental health as retiring from athletics was. So, with those tools, I started having those conversations, and more people said, yeah, I resonate with that. And I'm lost too. And I don't know what's next. And I don't know who I am. Um, and I wanted to share those stories because I didn't want it to be limited to just my perspective. I can speak on that certainly, but there's there's beauty and variety in this world. And having the Sideline Perspective be a website to share those stories just seemed like a calling for me. And there was a moment where, yes, I wanted to pursue it because hearing other people's stories was therapeutic for myself. But I also, having a psychology background, being a part of multiple sports, wanting to make connections in other areas of the sports world, having family members that competed at the Olympic level or professionally, like I felt connected enough even back then to be able to tell some powerful stories. And it felt as much as a passion as a responsibility to be able to start part of that conversation. And it's been really incredible how it's grown since.
So, what is your favorite story that you've been able to tell through that platform?
Hmm.
That's kind of an on the spot question, but is there one
Yeah,
that sticks out to
there's a lot. There's a lot. I've gotten to tell the stories of some of my really good friends, and I just have huge amount of respect for them because some of them were like writing their stories before this thing was even, live to the public. So they were just taking a stab at, putting themselves out there and not knowing what kind of momentum was going to be followed, like being those trendsetters. Um and then I've gotten to tell the stories of Olympic athletes and gold medalists and people that have accomplished some really inspiring things. But there's one episode that stands out in my mind, and it's with Molly O'Connor. I can't exactly remember what I titled it, but, I can tell you later, maybe you can link it below. And she tells the story of being a Olympic development soccer player and going through that process, competitive high level, and then going on to play in college and just kind of losing her love for the sport and getting burnt out and not feeling like it was her path anymore and not knowing how to handle that emotion and feeling the grief for the loss of a love of a sport, but then also knowing like that the time had come to move on to something else. And talks about having this conversation with her mom and her mom saying, it's okay if you want to step away from the sport, it is okay. and how powerful just that one sentence was, that she was, like, looking for permission to move on and be more than a soccer player, and that she felt like she couldn't do that without, the okay, or yeah, like I said, the permission of people who had been invested in her career, who loved her, who, maybe some part of her brain thought, loving her was conditional on her being a soccer player, her performing as a soccer player, and just the freedom that can come with that knowledge that, like, people in our lives see us and appreciate us for so much more than just our sport, and that she did go on to step away from playing soccer and find her own path, and she's doing incredible things now, like created a sports bra company and all that, but it speaks to the system, I think, is why I like that episode so much. It speaks to, how easily people can get wrapped up in, I'm going to climb the ladder, and the higher I climb, the more people will appreciate me, or that sports gives us social capital or gives us value in some unique way. Um, and that sometimes, like, even if we truly love our sport, or even if we don't, like, we feel like we need the permission of other people to even just express that. And that's kind of heartbreaking. And I like that episode because I think it shows people, like, hey, you don't have to be in love with your sport every second of every day. It's okay if you're not. I got burnt out towards the end of my career, and I wrestled with some of those emotions. But yeah, that one was powerful.
Yeah, I mean, I talk a lot on this podcast about athlete identity and how sometimes it makes you do some crazy stuff and stay in some situations that otherwise you wouldn't get out of. I mean, looking back on them, they could be toxic, but
Hmm.
you stayed in based on your identification as the part of that team.
Exactly. Yeah, that's exactly it.
So let's talk about, we were talking a lot about the negatives that sport brought you, but let's flip that on its head and talk about the positives. I mean, what's the most positive thing that you think that sports taught you?
Yeah, yeah, no doubt. Sport taught me that I am capable of so much more than I think. And whether that was through, the physical side of things, like I have one more sprint left in me, one more rep. To the mental side of things, of being able to, survive, or I don't know if survive is the right word, but, like, push through years where I was just sitting on the bench, and I, did not know where my career was going to take me, and to ultimately get to play at, Division 1, which is one of the top levels for women's hockey. Like, now there's a pro league starting up, but it's a lot of girls that I used to play with, and then the Olympic level, so grand scheme of things, it's some of the best in the world that I got to play alongside and compete with and hold my own with. Um, so it's shown me, like, to never give up, and to have faith and to back myself, and that I can be adaptable, I can learn, I can dig when I need to dig, and I'm going to land on my feet.
Yeah, I actually have an episode coming out. It'll come out after yours, but it's about the National Women's Hockey League.
Mm.
And I'm looking at getting the executive director of the Players Association on, but I also have a player, she plays for the Boston Pride, and it's going to be a really awesome episode. So it's fun that, like, you know those people.
Yeah, totally. And it's been really inspiring to see them, come together and fight for, what a sustainable league could look like, and to push for that, and to see more and more players that, I played with, or, are coming up behind me, come out of college and have an option. I didn't even really feel like I had an option. I could have gone abroad, or I would have had to, tie myself to a city like Boston, or, somewhere in Canada, or somewhere that was close to a team that, even at the time, like, it would just be an addition to your 9 to 5 day job. And, being a student athlete is totally difficult, but a whole 9 to 5 job, like, that's kind of a new level of, midnight ice times. And I didn't feel like I had it in me at the time, which is tough, that I felt like, okay, time to move on to a new chapter, because I don't see myself being able to make that work. Um, but other girls now have that option, and it is more sustainable, and it does have a payoff, and they can be visible to younger girls coming up through the sport. And it's incredible. Like, I have so much respect for them being able to be those trailblazers.
Yeah, I mean, I'm such an advocate for women in sports in any capacity because that's my industry as well, coming from the journalistic side. But I just think that it's so much fun to interview women like you because you've been so candid with me. And if I can just continue to have these conversations and to tell stories like yours, I mean, it's what gets me so excited.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. I would agree, from my side of things, one of the reasons I love the sideline perspective, like if it did nothing else, like it's given me the opportunity to have really authentic relationships and connections with other people. And that's made my life so much richer. So I totally resonate with that.
And then what's next for you? I mean, is there a career goal? Do you want the sideline perspective to be your career?
That's a great question. Yes, there's absolutely still the side of me, like I said, from being an athlete that just is hungry to see where potential lies. And that's something I've taken into my work with the sideline perspective. What is the full potential of this thing and of my ability to lead it and to direct it and to have it give back to other people. So yeah, I would love for that to be my full-time gig and everything that I get to focus on. Right now, I also work with US Ski and Snowboard as the manager of their athlete career and education department. So that work is still in the same realm. It's still really meaningful work with athletes and who they are beyond their sport. But at the same time, right, there's like it's a really cool piece of ownership about having your own thing and calling the shots on where it goes. So I don't know a timeline. I don't know, what's next is in the immediate future, but um long term, yeah, sideline perspective would be the dream to be able to do full time.
That's I mean, that's kind of in the same boat that I'm in because I launched this podcast, and although they're not my stories, I mean, they're your stories, but just to be able to trust me to tell you guys the stories has been so much fun. And this is what I want my career to be as well. I want to continue having these conversations.
Yeah, yeah, it's about lifting other people up and bringing visibility to their experiences. And, I've said with the sideline perspective, it was, about the experiences. Then I wanted it to be about the resources and then about, the culture itself. So, um, I felt like the between the podcast and the website and stuff I've been able to put in place for groundwork has started the experience part. We're putting together support groups and opportunities on campus and workbooks to provide the resources. So, more tangible aspects of how to navigate being sidelined as an athlete. And then ultimately, like wanting to be a part of turning the ship of where it goes and how athletes like experience our system start to finish because it's not like not being an athlete is tough just all of a sudden. It's tough because we're taught these lessons from 5 years old when we're part of, youth sports and that our culture spins these narratives, and I wanna challenge those. So, um, yeah, the more people that can speak about that, the more people that can, help to say, what they need, what they want, and then be a part of, like, contributing to that and shifting is the goal, and I think it applies to all different industries no matter what work you're in, like, storytelling is the most powerful way to connect people and to get people to really care about something.
Absolutely. And then if there is an athlete that hears this story and really resonates with you and your experiences, what are some resources that they can use to either get help or find support in other athletes who are going through what you've been through?
Yeah, well, first off, I'd love to be a resource, and you can connect with me at the Sideline Perspective. So yeah, literally at the Sideline Perspective on Instagram or the sidelineperspective.com. My email and everything is there, and even if you just want somebody to, vent or put something out into the internet too, I'm there. If you want to actually have a back and forth conversation, I'm there for that as well. And beyond that, I think there are so many different great like accounts. For example, there's Fueling Former Athletes. She targets on Instagram that athlete demographic, and She's a registered dietitian, so she focuses on, supporting people in their journey towards intuitive eating and getting away from kind of the disordered mindset and side of things, but really in particular with what that looks like when you leave being an athlete, because you often leave your structure for working out, and um, your body might have looked or been built a certain way for the purpose of performing in your sport, but without that framework you might want to change it, or different habits or thought patterns might come into play. So she's great about helping to manage that.
And then are there any national um help services? Like you said that you went to therapy, but is there anywhere that I can send anyone nationally? I mean, is it more of a regional therapist experience, or are there like national advocacy programs?
I mean, you can go to like psychology.com, I believe. I double check that link, but that's where you can find
I'll
kind of,
look it up.
yeah. You can find just kind of like a registry of like local therapists in your area and what they specialize in. But when I started going, I started just with somebody in um, as part of the college and within the athletic department, and then I found it was something that was really helpful in my life in general, not just for supporting recovery, but for personal growth as well. So when I moved out to Utah, I found somebody on psychology.com and was able to meet with her once a week for like the first year that I was out here, just settling in and navigating a new environment, new relationships, new things about myself. So I found that really helpful.
Yeah, and then once you had started the conversation regarding the disordered eating that you were experiencing, did you go back to your sports psychology staff at Dartmouth and have that conversation with those people as well? Or was it more of a third party therapist perspective conversation you were having?
Yeah, so it's interesting. So we had kind of under our umbrella of athletic staff, one main person who represented the psychology department to support the athletes. And that was the individual that I was seeing for therapy. Um, and it was kind of tricky, right? Because like I saw him my freshman year when I was like grieving, and that was my first experience with therapy. And it didn't feel like a productive relationship or a productive opportunity, because when he would come and give our team a pep talk before a game, or remind us of a mindfulness activity, I felt triggered by the fact that I was just in an office with him talking about my friend who had passed away, and that felt like it was being brought into the locker room. So that didn't work out so well for me initially, but later, and I don't know if it was just a being more mature as an athlete, as a person, because it was 2 years later that I started working with him to tackle food and body image. That was less of a struggle, and something that it fit a little bit more seamlessly, because I felt like tackling those things was going to help me be a better hockey player, and it was all kind of intertwined. So I would say, if you're someone listening to this and you're trying to figure out where that fits for you, like take a second to try and understand, like, where do you want your boundaries to lie between different areas of your life and what's being expressed, because while everything in that room is confidential, um it can also, like, it, what was experienced in both environments, so it can be something where you personally might want stronger boundaries. um so yeah, to answer your question, it was kind of already known by the time I was opening up to them, like it was the same person. So
Yeah, I mean, that's both a blessing and a curse if you're prior to talking about the boundaries of eating disorders that you're coming for a different reason, and then they're also talking to your team as a whole, and you're thinking, well, I just talked confidentially with this person and now we're in a team setting.
mhm. Yeah.
That's, I mean, that's a lot of boundaries to set in your head for a variety of different mindsets.
Yeah, absolutely. So it was definitely kind of tricky, but I thought at the time like that help was better than no help. And there was in some ways the advantage of the fact that he had worked with our team since my freshman year. So he knew me. I didn't have to explain if it was somebody else in that department who was less familiar with the athletic side, like um it would be harder for them to really understand like why I kept harping on like the role that hockey and being an athlete played in my life. And actually you are kind of just jogging my memory on the fact that I had tried to see somebody prior to kind of looping back in with him, because knowing that like it had been tough the first time I saw him, I was like, I don't know if that's the way to go, but I do need somebody. Um, and it was a woman, and she didn't really have the athletic context, and it just wasn't working. So I think that was why I went back to him, to this day I have a great relationship with him, just as um colleagues and friends and people who want to support athletes with mental health. Like it's been really cool the past 6 months. I've been able to support Dartmouth with different mental health initiatives and getting, a group on campus, like a Sideline Perspective group where they can meet and they can talk and go through topics and panels and perspectives of what other sidelined athletes are going through on campus, particularly with COVID. And he's been a main point person on that initiative. And it's been really cool. I think like to know that that's one person, whether we talk about it openly or not, who saw so much growth in my life. He's now known me for 8 years. So
Yeah, I mean, that you have a lasting impact on that campus. I mean, even outside of your two teams. So how does that, as you look back now, is that anything like the college experience and beyond that you expected to have? I mean, to leave such an impact.
it was one that I hoped. I really, really hoped. Like I grew up in a small town in Vermont, and it was a huge part of like who I am today, because everybody in a small town, a small community helps each other out, and kind of knows what's going on with everybody. And when I was looking at schools, I felt like I could go for a big school because that would be new. I could go for a small school because that would be familiar. And I am just so grateful that I ended up at Dartmouth, because it, pushed me to grow in all the ways that I needed to, but I was able to grow into a person and into a position where I could make an impact. And my biggest focus was that was going to be one that was going to give back. And so, yeah, like I said, I came in freshman year and was like, I want to be a captain. I don't know what it means. I don't know what it entails. Like, but I want to be that kind of person was what was most important to me. So, um, it makes me really happy. And I only feel like I am giving back a portion of what that school and those people have given to me and continue to give to me as an alumni. So it's just a win-win situation.
That's amazing. Your story is so good.
Thank you.
So is there anything else as we're wrapping up that you think that I missed talking about or that you would like to mention? I know I have all the links to all of the Sideline Perspective Instagram and Twitter and their website. Is there anything else that you want to talk about before we conclude?
Um, no, I think we touched on quite a bit. I just think like biggest takeaway for me as I continue to learn and be able to hear other people's stories, and one thing that I want to come through loud and clear for listeners, whether you're an athlete, a coach, a parent, or just a person, like sports are so much more than sports. And I could expand on that comment, 15 different ways, from the way that we worship, athletes as fans, to the way that, the athlete experiences, their life and who they are. Um, but just like know that if you're involved in this system, there's weight to it, and it changes lives and it impacts people. And that can be done in incredible ways, or it can like forever, you know, hurt somebody. And I, I just think like if we can be aware of that, like our influence is never neutral. It's always pushing towards one direction or another. And awareness is the first step to being more intentional about what our influence in this system looks like. So just challenge yourself to ask that question, what direction am I pushing this, and whose experience is what, because I'm a part of it.
Wow. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for letting me tell this story. Is there anything else that I should know that I either haven't covered, or you may want to add background information to, like where you were at this part, or who you were playing for example, that you think that I should know in terms of chronological order of telling your story?
Um no, I think like it was kind of like the food and body stuff. Obviously, like I said, started in high school and kind of ran through end of college. Like I was had, really strong moments as recently as a year ago, and like it's a forever kind of battle. But at the same time, like it was all pretty intertwined, and whatever you think sounds clear as a timeline, I think it's tough to, like I said, pull things apart. Everything kind of blends into it. Like my athlete identity was a big part of why I felt that way about food in my body, and vice versa. So, yeah.
Thank you so much. I will I'll DM you, and then I'll also email you once this is published. I think it will be 4 weeks from now, or 4
Okay.
weeks from tomorrow.
Okay.
And then we'll just go from there. I hope you love it.
Yeah, no, I'm really excited to listen to it. So thank you for having me. This
Thank
was
you
yeah,
for
a great way to
having
spend the
me.
afternoon.
All
Yeah.
right. Have a great rest of your day.
Okay. Talk to you later.
Bye.
Bye.